What kind of person tries to tear down someone's home without a shred of proof? The kind who thinks power comes from title, not truth. That's how it started with the HOA, a self-righteous pack of clipboard-wielding neighbors who decided my lake cabin was an eyesore. They didn't know I held a secret that could turn their world upside down. The sun was barely up when I heard the rumble of machinery rolling toward my property, a bulldozer growling like a beast ready to devour. I stepped out onto the porch of my cabin, the one my grandfather built with his own hands, its weathered logs holding memories of summers spent fishing and winters by the fire. The lake glittered behind me, calm and oblivious to the storm brewing on its shore. A woman in a crisp blazer, Karen Whitaker, led the charge, her voice sharp as she barked orders at the driver. "This shack's coming down today," she declared, waving a piece of paper she claimed was a demolition order. Her eyes locked on mine, cold and triumphant, like she'd already won. I felt my pulse quicken, not out of fear, but something fiercer, resolve. This wasn't just about my cabin. It was about everything they thought they could take. I crossed my arms, standing firm on the porch. "You sure about that, Karen?" I asked, my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. She smirked, flanked by two HOA board members, both nodding like obedient drones. The bulldozer idled, its engine a low threat. My cabin, tucked against the pines, wasn't much to look at. Peeling paint, a sagging roof, but it was mine. More than that, it was home. Karen stepped closer, her heels sinking into the soft earth. "This structure violates code," she said, thrusting the paper at me. "Unpermitted, unsafe, and frankly, an embarrassment to the community." Community. The word stung. I lived here for years, kept to myself, bothered no one. Yet here they were, ready to erase my life because it didn't fit their manicured vision. I glanced at the paper, a flimsy notice with no official seal, no signature. It was a bluff, and a bad one. "You're trespassing," I said, handing it back. "Leave." Karen's face tightened, her lips a thin line. "You don't get to tell us what to do, Elias. The HOA has authority here." Authority? She clung to that word like a lifeline. I could have laughed, but the bulldozer's presence kept my anger sharp. I knew something she didn't, something buried in a dusty file at the county office. Years ago, when my grandfather bought this land, he'd also quietly acquired the deed to the HOA's prized clubhouse, their temple of meetings and potlucks. They didn't know. Not yet. But I wasn't going to play that card until the moment was right. For now, I needed to buy time. "You're making a mistake," I told her, my voice low. "Push this, and you'll regret it." She laughed, a brittle sound, and signaled the driver to move forward. The bulldozer lurched, its blade glinting in the morning light. I didn't flinch. I stepped off the porch, planting myself between the machine and my cabin. The driver hesitated, glancing at Karen. Her face reddened. "Move, Elias, or we'll have you removed." The two board members shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension coiling tighter. I could feel the lake breeze at my back, the whisper of the water urging me to stand my ground. "You don't have a right," I said. "Check the records. This land's mine, and so's the cabin." Karen's eyes narrowed. "We've checked. You're squatting on HOA property." That was their lie, the one they'd been feeding the community for months, convincing everyone I was some drifter who didn't belong. They didn't expect me to fight back. They didn't know I'd been preparing for this day. The standoff stretched, the bulldozer's roar filling the silence. Neighbors started gathering, drawn by the noise. I saw familiar faces, people I'd waved to, shared coffee with, now watching like spectators at a gladiator match. Karen played to the crowd, raising her voice. "This man's been defying us for years. It's time we take back our community." A few nodded, but others looked uneasy, their eyes flickering between me and the machine. I caught sight of old Mrs. Hargrove, her hands clasped, worry creasing her face. She'd known my grandfather, knew what this cabin meant. I gave her a small nod, a promise I wasn't going down without a fight. Then I turned back to Karen. "You want to play dirty?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Fine. Let's see who's still standing when the truth comes out." She froze, just for a second, but it was enough. Doubt flickered in her eyes. She didn't know what I had, but she sensed it, a crack in her armor. The bulldozer idled, the driver waiting for a signal. I could feel the weight of every gaze, the air thick with anticipation. This wasn't just about my cabin anymore. It was about power, about who got to decide what belonged and what didn't. I'd spent years avoiding conflict, keeping my head down, but they'd pushed too far. I wasn't just defending my home. I was defending everything my grandfather stood for: hard work, quiet pride, and the right to exist on your own terms. Karen straightened, her voice cutting through the tension. "You're out of time, Elias. This ends today." But I wasn't out of time. I was just getting started. The bulldozer's engine growled louder, a mechanical beast poised to strike. Karen's confidence returned, her smirk sharp as she waved the driver forward. I stood my ground, the dirt beneath my boots feeling like the only solid thing left. The crowd murmured, their voices a low hum of uncertainty. I could sense their doubt, their questions. Why was the HOA so hell-bent on this? Why me? I didn't have time to explain. Not yet. My hand slipped into my pocket, brushing against the folded copy of the deed I'd carried for weeks, waiting for this moment. It wasn't just my cabin they were after. It was control, the kind of control that comes from making an example of someone who dares to stand apart. Karen's voice sliced through the air. "Last chance, Elias. Move, or we'll move you." The driver revved the engine, a warning. I didn't budge. My eyes scanned the crowd, landing on Tom, the local handyman who'd helped me patch the cabin's roof last summer. He stood at the edge, arms crossed, his brow furrowed. He knew me, knew I wasn't the type to bluff. I gave him a slight nod, hoping he'd pick up on it. He didn't move, but his eyes held mine steady. I wasn't alone, not entirely. "You're wrong about the land," I said, raising my voice so everyone could hear. "You're wrong about me." Karen laughed, but it was forced, brittle. "You're delusional. This property belongs to the HOA. We have the records." That's when I pulled out the deed. Not the original, that was safe in a lockbox, but a certified copy, stamped and notarized. I held it up, letting the paper catch the sunlight. "This says otherwise." The crowd went silent. Even the bulldozer's rumbles seemed to fade. Karen's face froze, her eyes darting to the paper. "What is that?" she demanded, stepping closer. I didn't hand it over. "Proof," I said simply. "My grandfather bought this land in 1962, paid in full. The cabin's legal, permitted in mine." Her mouth opened, then closed like a fish gasping for air. The board members exchanged glances, their confidence wavering. I pressed on. "And there's more. You might want to check your clubhouse deed before you start tearing things down." The clubhouse, their pride and joy, a gleaming building where they held their meetings, their wine nights, their self-important votes. What they didn't know was that my grandfather, in a forgotten deal decades ago, had bought the land it sat on. The HOA leased it, sure, but I held the deed. If they wanted a war, I'd bring one to their doorstep. Karen's face paled, but she recovered quickly. "You're lying," she snapped. "You think you can scare us with a piece of paper?" But her voice shook, just enough to betray her. The crowd was whispering now, the tide shifting. I saw Mrs. Hargrove step forward, her frail frame defiant. "Let him speak, Karen," she said. "You've been pushing this too hard." That was the twist I hadn't expected. Mrs. Hargrove, quiet and unassuming, throwing her weight behind me. She'd been at those HOA meetings, heard their plans, seen their overreach. Her voice carried a weight Karen couldn't dismiss. The bulldozer driver cut the engine, the sudden silence deafening. Karen rounded on her. "Stay out of this, Margaret. This doesn't concern you." But it did. It concerned everyone who'd ever felt the HOA's boot on their neck. Fines for untrimmed hedges, rules about mailbox colors, threats over minor infractions. I saw it in their faces, the resentment, the fear, the spark of rebellion. I seized the moment. "You've been lying to them," I said, pointing at the crowd. "Telling them this land's yours, that I'm the problem. But I've got the deeds, Karen, for this cabin and your clubhouse." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked truly rattled. The board members stepped back, distancing themselves from her. I didn't stop. "You want to tear down my home? Fine, but I'll tear down your precious clubhouse first." The crowd gasped, whispers turning to murmurs. Karen's composure cracked. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "But I would. I'd spent years keeping quiet, letting them think they could walk all over me. No more." The standoff held, the air thick with tension. Karen's hands clenched, her knuckles white. She wasn't used to being challenged, not like this. I could see her calculating, weighing her options. She could push forward, call my bluff, but she knew something was off. The deed in my hand wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a weapon, and I wasn't afraid to use it. The crowd was on my side now, or at least enough of them were. Tom stepped forward, his voice gruff. "Show us the deed, Elias." I nodded, holding it out for him to see. He scanned it, his eyes widening. "He's telling the truth," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Karen's face twisted, but she didn't back down. Not yet. She was too stubborn, too invested in her own power. But I could see the cracks forming, and I wasn't done pushing. The deed in my hand felt like a grenade, and I just pulled the pin. Karen's eyes locked onto it, her face a mask of fury and fear. The crowd pressed closer, their murmurs growing louder, a chorus of doubt and curiosity. Tom handed the paper back to me, his nod a quiet signal of support. Karen's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "This is a stunt," she spat. "You forged that document. We'll have it verified, and when we do, you'll be out of here for good." Her words were bold, but her hands trembled. She was losing control, and she knew it. The bulldozer sat silent, its driver now leaning out of the cab, watching the drama unfold. I could feel the weight of every gaze, the air electric with anticipation. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, not just to save my cabin, but to expose the HOA for what they were, bullies hiding behind rules they twisted to suit themselves. I stepped forward, closing the gap between me and Karen. "Verify it," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Call the county. Check the records. You'll find my name on this land and on your clubhouse." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she doubled down. "You're bluffing. That clubhouse has been ours for decades." I smiled, just enough to unnerve her. "Leased, not owned. My grandfather never sold the land. He leased it to the HOA, and I inherited the deed. You want to tear down my cabin? I'll revoke that lease and tear down your clubhouse instead." The crowd erupted in gasps, whispers turning to open chatter. Karen's face drained of color. She hadn't seen this coming. Neither had I, not fully, until I dug through my grandfather's old files a month ago and found the truth buried in faded ink. The board members flanked her, whispering urgently, but Karen waved them off. "You can't do that," she said, her voice rising. "The clubhouse is the heart of this community." The irony wasn't lost on me. They called it a community, but it was their kingdom, a place where they held court and passed judgment. I'd seen it firsthand. Neighbors fined into submission, families pressured to conform, all under the guise of standards. I wasn't the only one they targeted, but I was the one who could fight back. "The heart of the community?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You mean the place where you bully people into following your rules? Where you decide who belongs and who doesn't?" The crowd shifted, uneasy. Mrs. Hargrove spoke up again, her voice trembling but clear. "He's right. You fined me for my roses last year, Karen. Said they were too wild. I've lived here longer than you, and you treated me like a criminal." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Another voice piped up, "Lila, the young mother from down the road. You threatened to foreclose on our house over a late fee." The tide was turning, and Karen felt it. Her eyes darted, searching for allies, but the board members were silent, their loyalty fraying. I pressed my advantage. "You thought you could scare me into leaving," I said, "but I'm not going anywhere, and neither is my cabin." Karen's composure snapped. She lunged for the deed, trying to snatch it from my hand. I pulled back just in time, and she stumbled, catching herself on the bulldozer's tread. The crowd gasped, and for a moment I thought she'd fall. But she straightened, her face flushed with rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You think you can humiliate me? I'll have you sued, arrested, whatever it takes." Her threats were empty, and we both knew it. The deed was real, and the truth was out. But she wasn't done fighting. She turned to the crowd, her voice desperate. "Don't listen to him. He's trying to tear us apart. The HOA protects you, keeps this place beautiful." But her words fell flat. The crowd wasn't hers anymore. That's when Tom stepped forward again, his voice steady. "I'm calling the county right now," he said, pulling out his phone. "Let's settle this." Karen's eyes widened, but she didn't stop him. She couldn't. The truth was coming, and it wasn't on her side. As Tom dialed, I caught sight of the lake, its surface still and serene, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding. My grandfather used to say the lake held secrets, that it saw everything. Today, it was witnessing justice. I clutched the deed tighter, knowing this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every neighbor who'd been silenced, every voice the HOA had tried to crush. See you. Tom's call to the county office hung over us like a storm cloud, the tension so thick it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Karen's face was a mask of defiance, but her eyes betrayed her, wide, darting, searching for an escape. The crowd pressed closer, their whispers a low buzz, like bees circling a wilting flower. I stood firm, the deed still in my hand, its weight anchoring me to the truth. My cabin loomed behind me, a silent sentinel of my grandfather's legacy, its weathered logs seeming to lean in, listening. The bulldozer driver had climbed down from the cab, joining the onlookers, his hard hat tucked under his arm. Karen's allies, the two board members, stood frozen, their faces pale as they realized the ground beneath their authority was crumbling. Tom put the phone on speaker, and a clerk's voice crackled through, calm and professional. Yes, sir, I can confirm the records. The property at 47 Lakeview Lane is registered to Elias James Carver, purchased in 1962, fully permitted. No liens or disputes. A murmur ran through the crowd, louder now, like a wave breaking. Karen's head snapped toward Tom, her voice sharp. That's impossible. Check again. The clerk paused, then continued. I'm also showing a deed for the Clubhouse property at 12 Willow Road, also under Elias James Carver, with a lease agreement to the HOA renewable annually. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the air from Karen's lungs. Her knees buckled slightly, but she caught herself, gripping the bulldozer's tread for support. You didn't know, I said, my voice low but carrying to every ear. You thought you could erase me, but you didn't even check your own backyard. The truth landed like a thunderclap. The clubhouse, their sacred hall of rules and reprimands, sat on my land. I could end their lease with a single letter, reduce their meetings to nothing but memories. Karen's face twisted, a mix of rage and disbelief. This is a mistake, she stammered. We'll fight this. You can't just. But she stopped, her words choking off as the crowd's murmurs grew louder, their loyalty shifting like sand under a tide. Mrs. Hargrove stepped forward again, her frail frame radiating strength. You've gone too far, Karen, she said. You've hurt people. You owe Elias an apology. The crowd nodded, some calling out in agreement. Lila, the young mother, pushed through, her voice trembling with anger. You fined us for a cracked driveway while we were struggling to pay medical bills. You never cared about us, only your rules. The accusations piled up, each one a stone cast at Karen's crumbling empire. Another neighbor, Mr. Patel, spoke up. You threatened my store's permit over a sign's font size. Font size? The crowd's anger boiled over, their voices a chorus of grievances long suppressed. Karen's eyes darted, searching for an ally, but the board members stepped back, their silence deafening. One of them, a nervous man named Greg, finally spoke. We didn't know, Karen. You said the records were clear. Her head whipped toward him, betrayal flashing in her eyes. You're turning on me now? She snapped. But Greg shook his head. You pushed this. We trusted you. The crowd's murmurs became a roar, a reckoning years in the making. Karen had ruled through fear, but fear only holds until truth breaks through. And the truth was out, undeniable, written in black ink on county records. I held up the deed again, not to gloat, but to anchor the moment. This isn't just about me, I said, my voice steady, carrying over the crowd. It's about all of us, about what's right. You can't just take what's not yours. The words landed, heavy and true. The crowd cheered, a ragged, heartfelt sound. Karen's face was ashen, her authority stripped bare. She turned to the bulldozer driver, desperate. Start up. Do your job. But the driver shook his head. Not until this is settled, ma'am. I'm not breaking the law. The crowd roared louder, their voices a wave crashing over her. Tom hung up the phone, his face grim but satisfied. It's over, Karen. The county's sending someone to confirm in person. You can't touch his cabin. Her hands clenched, her nails digging into her palms. She looked at me, her eyes burning with a hatred that felt personal now, not just bureaucratic. You think you've won? She hissed. This isn't over. But it was. The crowd knew it, the board members knew it, even the driver knew it. I'd come to save my cabin, but I'd done more. I'd given the community a voice. and they were using it. The crowd's cheers echoed across the lake, a raw, triumphant sound that seemed to ripple the water itself. Karen stood alone now, her allies scattered, her authority shattered like glass under a hammer. The bulldozer sat silent, a hulking monument to her failed crusade. I could see the weight of it hitting her, years of wielding power, of bending neighbors to her will, undone in a single morning. My cabin stood untouched behind me, its weathered logs a testament to resilience, to roots deeper than her rules. The deed in my hand felt lighter now, not a weapon but a shield, proof that truth could outlast tyranny. The crowd pressed closer, their faces alight with something new. Hope, maybe, or the simple relief of being heard. Karen tried one last stand. "You're all making a mistake," she said, her voice shrill, cracking at the edges. "The HOA keeps this place beautiful, orderly. Without us, you'd be nothing but chaos." But her words were hollow, a dying echo of a reign that had already ended. Mrs. Hargrove stepped forward again, her eyes sharp. "Orderly? You mean controlled. You made us afraid to live in our own homes." The crowd murmured agreement, their voices a tide she couldn't stem. Lila added, "You turned neighbors against each other. That's not a community." The accusations kept coming, each one a crack in the facade Karen had built. Greg, the board member, finally broke his silence. "We need to meet," he said, glancing at the other board member, a quiet woman named Susan. "We'll review the records, the lease, everything. This stops now." Karen whirled on him, her face contorted. "You're abandoning me? After everything I've done for this place?" But Greg shook his head, his voice low. "You did this, Karen. You pushed too far." Susan nodded, her expression grim. "We'll vote on new leadership. This can't go on." The crowd cheered again, louder now, a sound that felt like freedom. Karen's shoulders slumped, her blazer suddenly too big for her frame. She was shrinking before our eyes, her power leaking away like water from a broken dam. I could have gloated, could have rubbed it in, but that wasn't me. My grandfather taught me to fight for what's right, not to revel in someone else's fall. I stepped back, letting the crowd take the lead. They didn't need me to speak anymore. They'd found their voices. Tom clapped a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. "You did good, Elias," he said. "Your granddad would be proud." I nodded, my throat tight. The lake sparkled behind us, its surface catching the sun, a quiet witness to the morning's upheaval. I thought of my grandfather, his hands calloused from building this cabin, his stories of standing tall against those who try to take what's yours. This was his victory as much as mine. Karen turned away, her steps unsteady as she headed toward her car. The crowd parted, not out of respect, but indifference. She was no longer their concern. A few neighbors called out, not taunts but truths. "Fix the fines," one shouted. "No more rules about grass height," another added. They weren't just angry, they were done. Done with her, done with the HOA's stranglehold. I watched her go, knowing she'd fight another day. People like her always did, but she'd never hold the same sway. The county would confirm the deeds, the lease would come under scrutiny, and the community would rebuild. Not her way, but theirs. As the crowd began to disperse, Mrs. Hargrove approached me, her eyes soft. "Thank you, Elias," she said. "You reminded us we're stronger together." I shook my head, deflecting. "It wasn't just me. You all spoke up." She smiled, a knowing look. "You gave us the chance." Lila hugged me, quick and fierce, her toddler tugging Oshauda at her leg. "We're free now," she whispered. The words hit hard, not because they were true, but because they felt true. The lake shimmered in the distance, its calm surface reflecting the pines and the sky, as if it, too, was celebrating. My cabin stood firm, its sagging roof no longer a flaw, but a badge of survival. The bulldozer driver packed up, tipping his hat to me before driving off, the machine's rumble fading into the morning. The crowd thinned, neighbors returning to their lives, but they carried something new, a spark of defiance, a refusal to bend. I walked back to my porch, the deed still in my hand, its edges worn from being clutched so tightly. The fight wasn't over. Karen might rally. The HOA might regroup, but the dynamic had shifted. The community had seen what collective strength could do. They'd stood with me, not just for my cabin, but for themselves, for the right to live without fear of a clipboard and a fine. Tom lingered, leaning against a tree, his phone still in hand. "County's sending someone tomorrow," he said. "They'll sort out the clubhouse lease, too. You've got them scrambling." I nodded, grateful but weary. "Thanks for the call, Tom. Meant a lot." He shrugged, a half-smile breaking through. "Couldn't let her bulldoze you. Or any of us." Mrs. Hargrove stayed, too, her eyes on the lake. "Your grandfather used to sit out here, telling stories," she said, her voice soft with memory. "He'd be proud of you, Elias. You didn't just save this place, you gave us back our nerve." Her words settled deep, warming me against the morning chill. I thought of my grandfather's hands, rough from years of work, his quiet pride in this land. He'd built this cabin not just for shelter, but for legacy, for the idea that you could carve out a life and hold it against the odds. Today, I'd honored that, not just for me, but for everyone who'd felt the HOA's weight. As the sun climbed higher, the lake caught its light, scattering gold across the water. Neighbors stopped by throughout the day, some bringing coffee, others just words of thanks. Lila told me she'd started a petition to reform the HOA to strip away its petty rules. Mr. Patel said he'd host a meeting at his store, a place to plan a new kind of community, one that didn't thrive on control but connection. Even Greg and Susan, the board members, reached out, promising to review the lease and the HOA's practices. They weren't my friends, not yet, but they were trying. That was enough for now. By evening, the lake was quiet, the crowd gone. I sat on the porch, the deed tucked safely away, my grandfather's old chair creaking under me. The fight had been brutal, but it had woken something in this place, a sense of possibility. The HOA might limp on, but it would never be the same. Karen's reign was over, not because I'd won, but because we'd all stood up. The lake whispered its secrets, just like my grandfather said it would, and tonight it told me we'd done right. The cabin was safe, the community was stirring, and for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just living here, I belonged. The stars came out, sharp against the dark, and I thought of the clubhouse, sitting on my land, a silent leverage I hadn't wanted to use, but would if I had to. It wasn't about revenge. It was about balance, about making sure no one else would feel the way I had, cornered, dismissed, erased. The community was waking up, and I'd helped light the spark. That was enough. More than enough. The lake gleamed under the moonlight, and I knew, sitting there, that this was home. Not just the cabin, but the fight, the people, the truth we'd reclaimed together. The next morning, the county official arrived, a quiet man in a polo shirt, carrying a briefcase stuffed with papers. He confirmed everything. The cabin was mine. The clubhouse land was mine. The lease details airtight. The HOA had no claim, no leverage. Karen wasn't there. Word was she'd left for a vacation, but the neighbors whispered she was dodging the fallout. The official shook my hand, his grip firm. "You've got a solid case, Mr. Carver. They can't touch you." I nodded, the weight of years lifting just a little. The cabin stood behind me, its logs weathered but unbowed, a mirror of how I felt. The lake sparkled, its surface catching the dawn, a quiet nod to the victory. Neighbors gathered again, not for a fight this time, but for something new. Lila had her petition already signed by half the community, demanding a new HOA board, fair rules, no more fines for trivialities. Mr. Patel offered his store for the first meeting, scheduled for next week. Mrs. Hargrove brought cookies, her hands shaking, but her smile steady. "We're taking it back," she said, her voice bright. "This place is ours again." The crowd wasn't a crowd anymore. It was a community, raw and real, ready to rebuild. Even Greg and Susan showed up, apologetic, promising to step down if the vote went that way. They knew the tide had turned. I didn't speak much that day. I didn't need to. The neighbors carried the conversation, their voices alive with ideas, community gardens, open meetings, a lake cleanup day. They weren't just fighting against something now. They were building towards something. I listened, leaning against my porch railing, the deeds safe in my lockbox. The clubhouse still stood, but its lease was under review. I wouldn't push to tear it down, not unless they forced my hand. It was enough to know I could, that the power wasn't theirs anymore. The lake watched, its waters calm, holding the secrets my grandfather swore it kept. By afternoon, the official left, and the neighbors lingered, some sitting on the grass, others by the water. Tom clapped my shoulder again, his grin wide. You shook things up, Elias. Didn't think you had it in you. I laughed, the sound easier now. Didn't think I did either. But I had. We all had. The HOA wasn't gone, but it was humbled, its claws clipped. The community was waking up, remembering what it meant to live, not just obey. I thought my grandfather, his stories, his stubborn love for this land. He'd built this cabin to stand against time, against storms, against people like Karen. And it had. As night fell, I sat on the porch again, the lake a dark mirror under the stars. The fight had been mine, but the victory was ours. Neighbors waved as they passed, their steps lighter, their faces open. Lila's toddler ran by, chasing a firefly, her laughter echoing across the water. Mrs. Hargrove left me a note, tucked into a cookie tin. You gave us back our home. I folded it, kept it with the deed. The community wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was alive again, messy and human and real. The cabin creaked as I leaned back, the sound familiar, comforting. The lake whispered, and I listened. We'd fought for what was ours, and we'd won. Not just the land, but the right to call home. And